meeting to order. We got everybody here. Wow. All right, first up, we got an oath of office.
Jonathan, just stand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Jonathan Marshall,
Do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support and maintain
that I will support and maintain
the Constitution and laws of the United
the
States
Constitution and laws of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of North Carolina,
and the Constitution and laws of North Carolina,
not inconsistent therewith,
not inconsistent therewith,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
of my office
of my office
as Director of the Water and Sewer Authority.
as Director of the Water and Sewer Authority.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we've got some retirement recognition.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we've got some lots of years of retirement recognition. I have two of our retirees with us, and I'm really glad they were able to come and join us. And one of them cannot, but we have two of them with us. Todd Sheets and Julie Haynes. Todd, will stand up, please, and cut people beside me, and Julie, if you walk outside of Todd. Todd was hired with Harris County as a utility maintenance worker. He was transferred to WSACC in 1996. Todd remained in his role as a utility maintenance worker with additional duties added to his position during the years, and then became a reservoir maintenance technician in April of 2000, and he remained in that position until he retired. Todd is a lake guy. He took care of our reservoir, stayed on the reservoir, and that was his sole responsibility. Did a great job, kept people from fishing in it. We hope he didn't slip in it at night and fish himself. But we're really glad that he was able to retire with 30 years of service. So really proud. I have Julie Hayes with me. And she was hired in July of 1992. Julie came to us from the city of Concord. And she came to us as a warehouse clerk. And she was promoted to purchasing technician in January of 1993. She became my purchasing agent in January of 1997, and she remained in that role until retirement, looked after all of our purchasing and worked in finance. And she has 30+ years of experience with water and sewer authority in her role, and she retired with us in June, like God. We're proud to have her with us. Yeah, Michael, if you will come up and stand up here, please. We're going to get some photos.
That's what we're getting.
I'll let you come separate and then I'll do it as a group.
All right. Ready, Julie? Here we go. Okay.
All right, Todd.
Come on, buddy.
I've known something for a long time.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to approval minutes. Motion to approve both items. Motion on the floor. Second. Properly seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. New business, discussion of board composition, representation, and capacity allocation committee.
We have a request from the town to appoint someone to the capacity allocation committee. Just give you a little bit of background so you can understand more of why. The town of Midland as for all of its capacity requests, they go through the city of Concord. And typically, all those are from Muddy Creek, which is not in conflict with the request we have for the plant. But Midland is in the process, or has recently done some annexations that will contribute to flow to the Rocky River plant. So they will also continue to ask for those requests through the city of Concord. So both plants will go through Concord, and Midland is concerned about having their representation and their thoughts and concerns addressed in the allocation committee. I will mention that the engineer for both Mount Pleasant and Midland serves on the committee, and he has brought up Midland a couple of times in our discussions. So there is some amount of representation, either informally or just by his job nature of shared duties between the two. So other than that, I don't have any other comments other than what the board would like to discuss about deciding whether to add another member to our.
It seems like, I see on the agenda, there's a report on the allocation. It seems like we ought to hear that report before we even talk about this. See how the first meeting went, and where they're headed.
Okay.
I mean, that's just my opinion.
Okay.
I agree.
We can wait.
That it? We did?
Yep.
All right.
Move on to the next
Good.
one. Come back.
All right, suspension schedule.
Right, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. At the board's request, several weeks ago, I prepared for Michael and sent out to the board a written memo outlining the schedule as we know it. Now, concerning the expansion of the plant. What I'd like to do right now is run through that real quick, and then take an opportunity to field any questions or have discussion on that schedule and as we're moving forward. So, kind of some of the items that are taking place now or have already taken place. First being in June, we did send out the RFQ for the requesting proposals or qualification packets for the design build of the Rocky River expansion. We have received a number of requests for that RFQ and some questions. We have heard back from several that they're not going to propose or present a packet on there. But we will know next week. Those are due back on the 22nd. So next Thursday, I believe that is. Those are due back. And our plan is to bring that to the board at the next board meeting in August with our staff recommendation that will be discussed by the board for considering of approval. Once that decision is made, then we will work with that selected team to come back to the board in September with that amount to get to the first GMP. And that will really, at that September board meeting, that will really kick that team into gear of moving forward. Also during that time, September 1st is when the preliminary engineering report is due to WSACC by Brown and Caldwell, our current engineer under contract, working on the design. That is on schedule. They said that will be delivered by September 1, if not a week or so earlier than that, but they are on schedule with that. Our plan is in the fall, once we select our design build team, and we're underway with that, to go out again to the street with an RFQ, which we have. I do believe we're going to have a lot of interest in for a selection of engineer to begin the permit study and negotiations with the state, what our future permit needs will be at the plant. That will involve almost kind of a refreshment of some of the master plan information, because you're going to need to be looking at ultimately population and flood projections into the future. Just studying the stream. It's going to be a multi-year project with a selected consultant. Our anticipation will be that sometime in the late winter or spring next year, so spring of 22, is when we will have our first GMP from our contractor and when construction should actually get close to the beginning for the expansion of the plant. Obviously, these dates will be better honed in once we have a team selected and we sit down with that team and digest the project with them to know these dates better. So this will be a monthly update to the board when we get to that point of where we're at. We would expect the summer, fall of 22 to get additional GMPs that would come in, whether they're for equipment procurement packages or other components of the project to get the expansion of the 30 MGD completed. We expect that in the fall of 22-23, that the design work would begin on the expansion for the 34. Obviously, we're going to push for that to begin as soon as possible, but as we see it laid out now, that's what we're anticipating. And that the spring of 24, the design goes in to complete the 30 MGD expansion, and the construction of the 34 expansion will be ongoing at that time. Right now, we believe spring of 2027, we will complete the total expansion of the 34. One point that we've heard loud and clear from the board, there's going to be no milestone of, hey, we've got to finish the 30 before we can start any construction on the 34. That's not going to be the way we proceed through this project. Really that milestone will be we've completed enough work to get that certification that we are now a 30 MGD plant, so now we can allocate 30 MGD. But I see this being a pretty seamless construction process, so there's not a ending and a ribbon cutting, and then we can wait a couple months to start construction again. It will be I believe a pretty seamless construction process to get this online as quickly as possible. So that's a quick run through that. Be happy to answer any questions, concerns you have on that this time.
Of the folks you've already talked to with this RFQ that you've sent out, Chad, and you say there's some that have opted not to pursue, did they give some reason?
Well, Brown and Caldwell is our engineer currently that we've been working with studying. They're going to be proposing in partnership with Crowder Construction as their team. The one team that came back to me, their reason they gave that they were not going to propose was because Crowder was already partnered with someone else. And that was their preferred contractor to work with for design build. So they didn't have a dance partner.
And as far as when 30 is complete and we start getting into the 34, not that it hasn't already started by this spring of 24, does that design build RFQ process, this process start all over at that point?
No. So this RFQ that we're writing is for the full expansion to 34. Now, we don't have to do with this team. Say we were unhappy with the process, or we didn't like the work, or whatever. We have plenty of outs to stop. Once we agree to and the board approves a GMP, then we're kind of committed to do that work. And until we agree to a GMP of doing that work, we're not committed to anything. Anytime we can say, we want your design, we're paying you for what you've done here on this design, we want it, and we're moving on to somebody else. So we always have that ability, but we do not have to go back out on the street for another proposal process.
What's the difference? What has to be done in the 34 part that is not done in the 30 part? Or maybe I should ask it in reverse. What is it you do in 30 that you can't do 34? Why can't it be done concurrently?
Well, a lot of the work can be. That's why I'm saying there's not going to be a complete the 30 and let's start work on the 34. Okay. The big reason is we know that the first component that really gets us to 30, I won't say it doesn't touch our current operation, because it's all around our current operation. You're not going in and upfitting current processes that are in place. Also, it broke out well from the design standpoint of let's get this design, let's get this under construction, and let's get this capacity online. And then we will get the other capacity online. I think beating the spring 2027 deadline, I think it's very, very, very achievable. Okay. Now, is that by 8 months? Is it by 14 months? I don't know that until we have a selected team to sit down and talk with. But primary push and goal with this kind is how can we get this built faster? What are we missing? What are options that we can put together that we can streamline to get this online as quick as possible? And that's one of your biggest benefits of doing design build, is have that contractor involved early.
Is that part of the RFQ process, is to understand their ability to do
Yes,
that? Are they
yes.
having to explain? to you how-
Demonstrate their ability, past work projects that they've done this, yes.
Chad and I have already been discussing different options. If they say we can cut the time by 6 months for additional $6 million, or we'll have to weigh whether that's worth it to our board for 6 months to spend $6 million more if they have to bring on a second construction crew or a third crew or whatever. So those are some of the things we're going to be weighing as we move forward. Is what's the value and time we get for the value in dollars we spend.
Did I understand something, Chad, incorrectly? Did you say that the permit that we have now will allow us to go to 30, but that permit would have to be modified in order to go to 34?
No, we have 30 and 34 currently, so we don't have to get a permit. We're actually still working through the final details of getting the page for 30 with the state, but we have the 34 permit. We're just working through some final details and getting the page actually inserted into our permit for the 30.
So while we're thinking about all this, I think we discussed last time, what is it going to take to go past 34? Because when I look at that number of spring of 27,
Yep.
that with the growth that's going on in Cabarrus County, a good chance is that's going to be pretty much sucked up by the time we get it built. Correct. Or allocated, maybe I should use that word, allocate, by the time we get it built. So what's our plan to take it past 34? And what do you need to do? Do we know what we need to do yet to take it past 34?
We don't, and that's the RFQ that will go out this fall to select an engineer to begin that study, that process. Because there's really two components to that. The one component is figuring out what are you going to need. You know, how much demand is there for, how quickly are you going to need that. The second part of that is analysis of your current process and what's going to be needed to be added, upgraded to get you that capacity. So the next question, do we need 6 million more? Do we need 10 million more? Do we need 12 million more? What do we need in the next chunk will be the first thing that we'll do. And that's what I'm saying, kind of an upgrade or refresh of our master plan, looking at population and ultimately flow projections. The second component of that is analysis. What will it take to do that?
And help me again. You said this fall?
Yeah, fall of
That
21.
runs- It
Yes,
starts.
yes, we will start that in the fall of 21. So I'm anticipating that RFQ going out in September, October of this fall. And that's where I'm saying that's a 2 or 3 year process to move through that, because going back and forth, the population projections, upgrading all that, I mean, that takes a significant amount of time. But then when you ultimately submit to the state and you start back and forth with the state, that just takes time.
And are you anticipating the biggest barrier to go further past 34 will be stream load? And how much load we're putting into the stream, or what the capacity is for the stream? Is that part of this investigation
Yeah,
too?
that would be a big
Or
part.
is it, parts and pieces to lay out to have a second train or whatever it happens to be? Or is it both of those things?
It's both. It's both of those. And your third challenge is really trying to accurately predict what are we going to need. So we obviously would rather have a permit and a design ready and determine that we don't quite need it yet, than to be in this situation again where we're being squeezed and we don't have a permit, we don't have a design started or completed. So our push is going to be to get that permit. You got to have the permit before you can really fully design what you need. So that's going to be our push while we're not waiting until we've completed this project, the expansion, to start that. We want to get that moving now.
I mean, when I'm sorry, Lynn.
When you get older, you have to say what you're gonna say quick or you'll forget it. Nobody can relate to that problem. But anyway, Chad, have we got any news from Deaner about the reduced flow because that's gonna have a big effect on capacity and in relation to Mayor Hennett's comments about moving it right along. Well, if we get that reduced flow, obviously that's going to increase capacity, so it might buy us a little more time. So where are we on that?
We submitted an email request on July 1 to the state, to the head of that department to get an update on where that is. We did not hear anything back. On Monday, I sent a second email, just checking in, letting them know we had a board meeting Thursday night. My board was very interested in knowing what that update is. I still have not heard anything. So we got a call tomorrow with Chuck Willis, our engineer, on that to figure out how hard do we push this and tactically what do we do now? Does that revolve around another letter or email coming from Michael? Does it involve going above that individual to his boss? Well, tactfully, what is the smartest move to make? But we have not got a response yet to the request.
And I think it's very detrimental that we,
Yes.
push them, because if we don't, we're the ones that lose it in the end.
Yep.
Because time is slipping away, and the schedule that you proposed here, all of that is affected whether or not we get this.
Yep.
And so it might mean that and I mentioned this once before, that we get legislature involved. I know that's sort of a strong push,
Right.
but it might be just a little nudge that we need to get them to do something.
Right.
So just for
No.
consideration.
No, I hear it loud and clear. We'll continue to push that.
As far as updates for this beyond 34 permit, fall of 21 sounds like pretty aggressive schedule to me. And you're talking about updating master plans and population projections and all that kind of stuff. Do you feel comfortable with that timeline?
Well, that's where we're gonna go out to select an engineer to start that process. So that's when I'm anticipating that we would come to the board with an engineer that we selected through an RFQ process to say, we want to engage this engineer to do this study for us. So they would begin that work at that time. It wouldn't be the completion of that work.
So as far as the time that it takes to do that, you've already mentioned 2 or 3 years to work through that permitting process with the state. Is that what happens during that time period?
Correct.
Okay.
So I think somewhere in the 9 to 12 months after they started their study, we would be back to the board and saying, this is what we think we need volume wise. This is what it would roughly, we think is involved to do that it would take to support that. This is a very high level cost estimate of what that would cost. And during that time period, you'd be going to the state with that as well. But you gotta understand, when you go to ask for a new permit, you have to do engineering alternative analysis studies, you gotta do environmental impact statements, you have to do a lot of work that takes significant amount of time and significant dollars to do that. So that's why I don't want anyone to believe that we're gonna have that wrapped up and done in 18 months. It's probably gonna be more of a 2 or 3 year process. And with the speed at which the state's been moving, it may be a 4-year process. You just don't know that.
Well, it only take 3 years to get 100,000 for Muddy Creek, right?
Exactly.
Chad, do you anticipate on the design build that there's any of the time constraints are related to lead time on materials? And is there a chance to do an early GMP to get it kicked off?
Yeah, I think that will be one of our first, I don't know whether it'll be 1 or 2 or how, but I think our early GMPs will be site work and starting work on the concrete tanks. There will be an equipment procurement package to get that equipment on order and move it. And whether that's done as 1 or 2, or I'm not sure. That'll be involved when we get into them. But I think that's, my first, the first meetings we sit down, it's gonna be, all right, let's decide where's our critical points, where's our pinch points, all right, what do we gotta do to move that pinch point back? All right, what's the next, what we gotta do to move it back? And at some point you arrive at that point of diminishing return where you're spending, a lot to get very little return. The challenge on us, the staff, is to figure out where is that? and try to optimize that the best we can. Because Michael's example earlier, I think most everyone, if we could get it built, you know, $120 million project, we could get it built 6 months quicker for $6 million. I think everybody would probably be pretty agreeable with that, but I know that's a hypothetical, but you know, if you're gonna save a month and it's gonna cost you 20 million,
Right.
you know, that's a different ballgame, so.
Right.
Good.
Well, I plan on providing pretty much monthly updates to this. Certainly, if there's any questions or you have any concerns, then reach out to Michael or myself, and we'll be happy to update or explain something better, or if you got ideas, I mean, please let us know.
You're up again.
Yep. I've been doing this too often. All right, well, we're going to talk about the capacity allocation committee. I'll start off by saying we've been about 2 meetings, which we squeezed those in around holiday. Right before the 4th, we were able to meet as a group to kind of a kickoff meeting, make sure everybody knew who everybody was. I took the opportunity to really give them a lot of background on the plants, when it was built, past upgrades, capacity we've seen over the years. A lot of the information we've talked about over the last 6 months in here. Also talked with them a lot about our flow reduction factor requests, and we got into a lot of that information. So the first meeting, they had to listen to me talk for quite a while. And we left that meeting with a number of action items for the jurisdictions or the members to go back and work on over about a 10-day period. It was a pretty good request. We made up to do a good bit of work, and we had our second meeting yesterday, and I have to say that everyone came very prepared and ready to work. We had about a 2-hour meeting yesterday with a very engaged group. So kudos to everyone that was appointed to that committee. They're taking it very seriously and very engaged, and that's very good. Wanted to provide just a quick update on some of the things we're working on. Obviously, the biggest task that the committee has to try to determine is with the pot of flow we have left or we have into the future, how does that get split up and how does that get managed? That's the biggest thing there. There's a lot of background information that goes into that that needs to be worked through and understood. One of the biggest, and it was a question we talked about a number of times over the last couple of board meetings, are how are projects routed through the jurisdictions? You know, and is that a pretty uniform process when they come to WSACC and request flow acceptance, or is there some discrepancy among jurisdictions? Well, the thing about it, it's very simple. I think everyone pretty much is sending those projects to us, and they're somewhere around the 95+% construction drawing. So essentially, construction drawings are completely done and approved is when it's coming to WSACC for approval. So we really didn't have much there from a residential, especially standpoint that there was any discrepancy. So that was a good positive thing for sure. We've also talked through, and the jurisdictions are doing a lot of work on their projects in the pipeline list that we call that. What we've challenged each jurisdiction to do is a very tough task, and that's to try to give us a really good feel of how much capacity is going to be needed before the 30 MGD comes online. In that time period when we're at 30, the 34 is not online, how much is it going to be after 34 with those projects? It's very tough because try to nail that down, but they're making good progress on that. And I'm hoping that we can come back to the board and be able to understand, just how much demand we have before we get this 30 online and before the 34. And I think that'll be important information to know as we move through and we're trying to make some of these decisions on, was it worth this cost to accelerate the project? I think it's going to be important information. So those are going to be active living lists that are going to have to be kept up on a monthly, if not daily basis by the jurisdictions. We've also talked a little bit about some items such as what's an economic development project and how does that get defined? as we've all experienced when we try to talk about that, that's a tough one to ever get completely nailed down because to a lot of different people, it means a lot of different things. And then we're talked through some, trying to get a good grasp and understanding of what's our upcoming needs for the governmental, institutional items, emergency management, hospitals, schools, all of those things. And the jurisdictions are each refining those lists, so we have a good feel of what's that that demand look like over the next couple of years for those type of services. So with that, I wanted to kind of just let you know that it's going very well. Our goal is going to be next month to be able to come back to the board. I think Michael will come back to the board with a recommendation from the committee of what they're, how they view splitting up this flow and managing the flow over time and how that could be done the most effectively. I would kind of talk through this. It's going to be a case where nobody's probably going to be 100% happy, but hopefully we end up where nobody's completely thrown under the bus either, and we can find a solution that works pretty good for everybody, even though it may not work great as we're going through this challenge. So with that, any questions anyone has on the committee?
Do you have a list of who's on the committee you can share with us?
Well, certainly, I'll send that out tomorrow. Certainly do that.
How about the number?
So there's 2 members per jurisdiction. So there's Concord, Mount Pleasant, Harrisburg have 2, and the county have 2. So there's a total of 10 members that represent the entities in the county, in Grass County.
And does WSACC have 2?
Correct. So yes, we can send that out for sure.
The Midland question, I think, is, in my mind, it depends on what this committee's charge. If it's just an advisory committee that's not going to take votes or do anything other than try to develop a program that the WSACC board will vote on and decide how to do, then I don't have any problem with them attending meetings. But I think if it's set up where they are an advisory board, a more formal situation where they're making specific recommendations to the board for us to consider along the way, like allocation of those things, I think that's a totally different animal. I'm not saying I will support that, but I just think that to rethink it if it's, or think of it from a different perspective if that's the case. So I think it's too early to tell until we decide what the role. This committee could be done after one meeting, maybe. I mean, who knows? Or it could be just a periodic sort of review thing. But if it has some authority, we're going to give them on making decisions. That's a whole different animal. I just don't know that we know that yet.
Maybe I'm not to answer my question, but I think if you figured out whether you think these are public meetings.
Yes.
We observe.
But yes, we do have made the determination that these would be public meetings, and we did allow Midland representative to attend. And that these would, going forward, we're gonna do notices. For the next meeting, there will be a notice that goes out. And what we talked about at the end of last meeting is having a regular schedule going forward. In these first 2, we scheduled them so quickly because we really wanted to have the benefit of having 2 meetings before this board meeting. Going forward, these will be regularly scheduled, and we're thinking at the front end, probably every 2 weeks. So to Mike's point, we think this committee, I'll tell Chad a little bit. I was in attendance at both the meetings. These have been really productive because and it's a large part by virtue of the people the jurisdictions have appointed. And these 10 people are folks on the ground and they know what's going on in their jurisdictions in the county. And then at the meetings, Chad has been here, Thomas has been here, and Michael has been here as well, even zoomed in from the beach the first time. And so, even just from a practical perspective, I think the committee's done some good things. It was really good for everybody around the table to share their processes and compare and contrast. And the big takeaway Chad and I had was there was more uniformity, than we had expected, which was a good thing. And also, it was good. The pipeline thing is important. It's important for right now, but it's also important it's going to be important for planning purposes going forward. So I tend to think this committee could be something. I don't think it'll have to meet every 2 weeks forever, but I think meeting one more time and then meeting again in the August board meeting. And so it is an advisory, it has no role to, it can't bind this board, but I think it can really look into things in a more in-depth thing of like 2 hours and then 2 hours, and they're doing homework and they're talking to staff members. And then the good news, like what Chad said, is our sense was people did their homework. They came to this second meeting and had things to offer. And so I think this could be a good thing. And then ultimately, even the board is going to make these decisions, not this committee. But the committee could offer some suggestions that Michael could share with the board at the August meeting.
Do you think they will take votes at times? Or do you think it's not going to be quite that formal? I mean, I guess they had to, but I mean, is that going to be a normal course of action, or is it too early to tell?
It's probably too early to tell. We haven't had, it's been discussion so far. You know, even if they did a vote, it wouldn't be a binding, but it would
Right,
not
sure.
bind WSACC or this board. Obviously, you cannot delegate your authority to this board, and you wouldn't want to do so.
Right.
But it could be. I expect some spirited debates. You know, we fully are prepared for that to talk when we talk about the allocation. I mean, that's going to be a discussion. But the neat thing about this, the folks who are in this committee, they really are the boots on the ground folks. And so that I think this committee could be a good thing to do the legwork in between meetings, in between board meetings.
Okay.
I'm happy to hear what you said about uniformity, because that was my concern, as we sat here and talked about, at what point are the jurisdictions asking WSAC for the service letter? And I was afraid that was not uniform.
Yeah, and Chad might can speak to that, but give you the technical part. But
Yeah, it was very uniform. It was very much so. They all have different names for their processes, where they're at in the process, or different terminology. But the simple fact is that construction plans have been reviewed twice or 3 times. And they're kind of, they may move the hydrant to the other side of the street, or they may, you know, move something a little bit forward. But when it comes to the number of homes that are going to be built or the layout of that subdivision, it's done.
It's a real, when you hear about it, it's a real problem.
Correct. They've been paid fees and they've been paid, you know, it's a real project. It's not a thought. You know, the one we got into the discussion was on some of the like upfits of old buildings that have been abandoned and commercial stuff moves a little different, you know, but not necessarily really different between the jurisdictions, but they move different than a residential project. It's always going to take 3 to 12 or 6 to 12 months or whatever. But I felt confident that the projects were coming to the WSAC from a flow request at a pretty common uniform stage.
I wanted to mention, as the commissioner for Midland, I was the liaison for them for about 6 years. And it's obvious to everyone, they want a seat on this board, but we all know that. And my position on that has been, don't think so right now for a lot of reasons. All of us probably already know. But as far as the allocation committee, I have no problem with them having a seat on that committee. Because Midland, believe it or not, you know, they really have a ton of potential. I mean, we know that. A lot of things are holding them back. And not that a seat on the allocation committee would release those things that's holding them back, but it would at least be the first rung on the ladder to getting somewhere. I can eventually see them having someone represent them on this board at some point, but I think we've got to crawl before, you know, walk and so forth and so forth. And so this might be an avenue that we could let them be a part of something where they don't vote. And it eventually comes back to this board anyway. And that's just my 2 cents. You know, I think they sometimes, you know, get in the way of their own self, you know, and that's just being blunt. But, you know, and that's my thoughts on it. I really think that we ought to consider letting them have a seat on the capacity allocation.
So likewise, I 100% agree. I feel this is an opportunity for them to speak for themselves. I think with this process we're going through with that potential that Midland is seeing and the growth opportunities, I think it's important that they do have an avenue to speak for their own needs and their own growth projections and those sorts of things outside of the official voting mechanism. And I think this would be a good opportunity to, again, just allow them to present their own firsthand information of what the development process looks like in Midland. Until then, hopefully, one day we have a way to get them to a utility provider and get them to a seat at the table.
I'm good with that. Because one similar situation we have is with the town of Landis, which is very similar. It's never been discussed that I know of on this board, but we have a project that's going to be in the mix on all this, that's split by our jurisdictions, and all the sewers coming through us. So it's a WSAC thing. And we're going to be in the position somewhere through this process of having to decide if they get that allocation or not. It's no different. It just happens to be in a different county, but they may say, I'd like to be at those meetings to push for that. So just heads up that I don't think it'll happen, but it's exactly the same situation. It's Concord's relationship to Midland is our relationship with Landis. In fact, it's a little more. Landis has a utility system. They buy all their water from us, and this sewer for this particular project is coming through us. So very similar. So it's never easy, the situation. But I'm good with Midland too. I think having her on the committee makes some sense.
I don't have a problem per se with that. But Lynn, going back to what you said a minute ago, there's a lot of history with Midland before you came on this board. The only thing I want to stress is if we give them a seat on this committee, I do not want that to be perceived in any way, shape, or form that is a precursor for them to have a seat on the board. I mean, I think it's two separate issues, and I don't want them or anybody else to misunderstand. If we give them a seat on this allocation committee, that does not say we're prepping them for a seat on this board. We've been through this study several times, and that's why we haven't changed our position on that yet. So
I would add to that. I think we ought to send a signal that, or make the decision that they would not have any direct decision-making on the allocation. There wouldn't, all the allocation that happens through this process needs to flow through Concord. It's Concord's decision, in my opinion, on if any of this allocation gets provided to Midland. And I think that's just fair. We're in a tough situation here, and the jurisdictions have been paying for WSAC as an organization for several decades, and our ratepayers have been paying for it. So when we're in this situation of having such limited resources, we have to be real careful about how it's allocated.
So that brings back the point I made before, and that is Charlotte Water right now has 6 million gallons of capacity of our 26.5, and 40% of everything we're building after this.
Got to bring up the Lodge Creek.
Well, go ahead and say it. Go ahead and say what you want.
I've said before that I think and I don't know what your discussions have been about this allocation committee and what your determination is made on where they stand against that 6 million as they hit their cap. But I'm guessing they have some interest in what's going to happen with the future allocation. Of course, they've contracted for a portion of it as a percentage. So maybe they have less question than anyone else. They know what they're getting. But ultimately, if we're talking about the board membership, I said before, I could see Charlotte Water saying, well, we ought to have a person on the board because we certainly have contributed to rate paying and capital.
I guess this whole thing gets in, and I don't want to be to jump the gun before the committee has a chance to recommend something to the WSAC board, but if it ultimately ends up with an expansion of what you just described with Charlotte, and the member jurisdictions have the same kind of allocation, if that's where the committee's going to make a recommendation, I'm not sure what the role of the committee is at that point. We just divvy it all up, and then the jurisdictions make the individual political, in a lot of cases, decisions on how it gets allocated. And then the committee can meet, but I don't know. So again, I don't know if that's what they're going to recommend, but that's sort of what I advocated for at the last board meeting, is that kind of simple just allocation. And Charlotte's got 40 and Concord gets 42 and whatever the numbers are. And we all just, make our own decisions about how it's divvied up and communicate that with WSAC staff of how that happens. But
So, I mean, just in his updates, I'm glad to hear about the uniformity, the discussion you're having. I think it sounds like the committee is learning something, and I get the feeling Mr. Fowler's going to be getting more tours of the landfill. I'm not sorry.
I do landfill.
Landfill, yeah, we do that. We know you do a lot of that. But also think that this committee is a precursor to that next permit, because these are some of the same people that are working on those determinations on what's gonna be needed next, and ultimately, this committee, plus a lot of other people, are gonna be updated to the master plan.
That may be the most important role for this committee we're not talking about.
Yes, they're not coming into that process. They're coming into that process with a lot more knowledge than they probably have in the past with that master plan.
No doubt. And I think that role is gonna be critical for that committee. Be the sounding board for that, that new permit.
And I mean, the discussion around how this gets split up on the board has been very thorough so far. I think Louise pointed out, we may get a little more spirited as we get down to making the final decision on some of this, but it really does fall into from 1,000 feet, this problem's bad enough, trying to figure out how to divvy this up. When we start getting down to that 10-foot level or that 1-foot level, and you start getting to some of the little intricacies of it, it gets pretty complicated, and I think that's the way it's where the board can be or the community can be very valuable to flush through a lot of that when that recommendation comes to the board. Ultimately, a lot of that's been flushed through.
Well, as Lynn suggested a few moments ago, sometimes it's difficult for them to get out of their own way in decisions. And so I think all of us have recognized at one time or the other that they need to learn some skills in collaborating rather than demanding, as they have tended to do most frequently in their past. And as a result of that, hopefully they can see this committee working and collaborating together to work out the difficulties of how it is the best everybody can be treated fairly and consistently along the way. And they may even get a feel for what it means to collaborate and learn some skills in that process. And I think many of us would be thrilled to death to see them develop some of those skills. So I think that they ought to be on the committee.
Well, I think it kind of ties in with report number 3 that we're going to get from William and talking about this interlocal agreement setup that we've been talking about between the jurisdictions. Because if that goes forward, I see the committee is playing an integral role. And like you're talking about, like at that point, I mean, they're going to be taking votes and sure enough allocate.
So we got lots of opinions. Why don't we go for a motion to see, we'll just add them to this committee with no other strings attached. That way we can at least get past this. It sounds like most everybody's in agreement.
William, the way we created that committee was 2 representatives of each.
Yes, I was gonna say, we really, as far as this, we're back, really, I would consider we're talking under new business now, discussion. And so, yeah, there would be a motion to add 2 representatives. The reason we have 2 is obviously summer schedules. It just ensures hopefully that one of the 2 can come. So far, we've been really fortunate. We've had 9 out of the 10 or 10 out of 10 yesterday, or 2 days ago. So that's worked well. So I think the motion would be to add 2 representatives.
I would make that motion to add 2 representatives of Midland with the caveat that they're non-voting members. And I don't even know if they're going to be, but if there are, I think that's how we should do it for now.
I would second that motion, Mike, no problem, but with the understanding, instead of doing the 2, William, I think we could do the 2, but leave 1 as a placeholder, just in case Landis decides to come on. Because I mean, if they don't come home, it's a placeholder. That would be our way, say we add 2, but we only will get 1 from Midland and potentially 1 from Landis, or that would be the only jurisdiction that I know of that could potentially want to be on that.
Well, to that end, why don't we just add 1 member from Midland? I'm not sure they need 2 anyway, just a
So
representative.
Richard McMillan, I assume.
They could have a backup on there as long as one person shows
Well,
up.
yes, so to I think Michael maybe mentioned it before, but yes, the representative for Mount Pleasant also worked for Midland. And so he had a seat, actually sat right there, and he did admittedly say, I'm wearing my Mount Pleasant hat now, I'm wearing my Midland. So to effectively, Midland did have a seat at the table already. But the reason, like we said before, the 2 is not so much for the voting, it's more just ensure 1 person of the 2 can make it here.
And they had somebody in the open meeting as well.
Yes, that's right. So they had, yeah. These are
The
public
latest
meetings,
question
so they will have
is
the
if it
opportunity
is.
to end public comments and proceed. if you chose not to.
My motion still stands two
And I'll second.
non-voting, up to two non-voting members.
For Midland. And you
For
second.
Midland.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nay, opposed? Nay?
All right, I've got one more thing while we're on the capacity allocation committee. This is something that William and myself had started a couple weeks ago and then was taken up by the committee and reviewed by the committee. And that was kind of a capacity statement from WSAC to try to put forth a fairly broad but informative statement of the capacity and the expansion and the time frame we're looking at on some of this and some of the impacts from it. So I have a copy of that I'm going to pass out to each of you for you to read. And then we can discuss. I'll just let each of you kind of read that to yourself.
Correct.
That's right. We did share this with the committee members, and we got feedback from Cabarrus County, which we incorporated in this. We got feedback from Concord and Mount Pleasant that they were fine as is. But it was sent to all visiting municipalities of the county.
We recognize with a statement like this that the tough part's always where to stop and how much information to give and how much information not to give. And William and myself went back a number of times, and Michael gave input on that as well of the challenge of how far to go. We recognize that if a developer called up and said, "We hear you're running out of capacity and you're reading this," his response is going to be, "Well, what does that mean to me?" That's going to be the response that you're going to hear back from that. And a lot of that's going to be settled once we hear back from the state. We ultimately get that approval and we ultimately distribute, or however it's handled, the pot of capacity. Then that jurisdiction has the ability to answer that a little bit better with their list and with the priorities that they make or determine. So it was a tough to know how much or how little to say, but this is what we've got and what was reviewed by the committee. So be happy to take any comments or discussion amongst yourselves or whatever about that.
My first overarching thought about this whole thing is I don't think this is the kind of thing that we do press releases on, this is just to be able to answer questions as they come up and make sure we're all on the same page about how we answer it, because this is so nuanced and the general public, like there's a good segment of our population that would be on the other side of this and would love that we have no capacity and we have to stop growth. So a major part of our community, and we just don't need to get in the middle of that if we can avoid it. That's my big issue. So I don't think I don't think developers are going to be out there talking to the press or anything. I mean, this is, I think we just keep it. I'm not saying we hide it, but we just don't need to do any kind of outward kind of communication on this. This is a issue we're dealing with the development community, and that's sort of the two players in this. That's my opinion, overarching sort of.
And I think William and Michael might correct me, but I think the goal of this would be a statement that would be distributed to the board members to utilize throughout their and then I think one that we've had it quite a bit from this EDC has asked that it would be nice to have a statement on their.
If it was okay for us
On
to
my
get
side,
that.
about that.
Are they gonna be, are they gonna be selective about how they use that information? EDC, I mean, that's, I mean, they can go everywhere once they get it.
Well, they're already aware of the issues because we've been dealing with it for them on a lot of
If our
projects.
EDC can't be discreet, then nobody can. I would hope they would.
Supposed to be good at that.
So, but you're right. Once it's out there with another organization.
You know, if they tell one developer, then.
Yeah, we were on a phone call today where the capacity issue came up and the project was a little concerned about it.
The other thing is, I was in a staff meeting the other day and one of our staff members said, we have $100,000 gallons of capacity. We're going to stop development. I quickly said, that's not the message we're sending. And I hope all the member jurisdictions can be on the same page and the EDC about that. That is not the message we're sending. Now, maybe some of our jurisdictions, maybe some factions of our jurisdictions that are comfortable with that. I can speak for ours pretty solidly. That's not the message we want to say. That the doors are closing or the doors are even, hard to get through. We want to, so it's all spin because we got a challenge, but phasing and words about, that kind of thing has got to be part of the message, I think, is that it's not a closed door issue. We're working on it and we got to collaborate and be creative with how we get through this with the development community, not, we got a problem, we're shutting the door and we're okay shutting the door. That, at least from our perspective, I don't think that's something we want to have out there. And that filters down to all of our staffs too, to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Part of this is even this simple message is consistency. I think I shared with some of you, my next door neighbor, I was doing some yard work and he stopped me, he goes, I want to talk to you about allocation. He's an engineer with a project in every one of your jurisdictions. Trust me, he asked me about projects. In every one of your jurisdictions. That goes for you too, Cassie. And I could have just told us, here you go. That was a message. Carry it around with you.
Pull it out.
I think Chad has talked to a number of developers and he always gets the same message. When they know that we are under contract to design it and we're getting ready to start building it, it gives them a lot of relief because they go to places that are at their capacity and they haven't even started design work yet. So they are years away from any kind of relief. So when they hear that, there's a certain amount of comfort in them to know that we are making the effort and it is coming. It's not, but maybe coming, it is coming because we've made those efforts.
Oh, and I joke about it, but that was ultimately the question is, well, are you really going to build this capacity?
Yeah, that's what.
Because all these people do work in Union County and they know they line up and they wait. And then the gate opens and some of them run through and some of them get the gate closed.
Yeah, so the message of what we're building is critical and that we are building and that is moving forward. That is the time frame.
And I think it will be a positive piece of news once we have a selected design build team and we can say who that team is and who that contractor is and they're under contract and underway. Then I think that's just another proof that this is not a project that may happen. This is a project that is happening and it's going to happen as quick as we can make it happen.
I mean, this statement and the schedule you went to earlier tonight.
Yes.
Go on your website. That way, maybe you don't get as many questions. I'm just gonna read it
Yeah,
myself.
be very open and public
Yeah.
about what we're building and when we're going to build the schedule.
Say this is the intended schedule. Well, that is the question. Are we really doing it?
So we have an engineer on a design team on board and they're designing it now. I think that's a good message. I will say from a technical standpoint, we reviewed it separately too. And one of the big red flags I had is we got in here that we had an engineering consultant in 2019 to design. If I'm a developer saying, see, you've been working on this for 2 years and you still don't have a design, I know what this means, but we ought to clean that up because that's what I first read is. So you've known enough about this for 2 years to have a professional on board helping you, but we're just now starting the real design process. So we just got to clean up either take 2019 out but part of that is good too, to say this doesn't happen overnight. So we have been working on it. It's not like we've been asleep at the wheel.
I know one of my changes I recommended was it said rapidly and
Yes.
faster, and I started to panic this week, even though I knew what that meant. And I think but that was indicating what has happened. That, you know, we took this long to kind of creep up in usage, and then we shot. So that's the other explanation, but you're right, it could go on forever, kind of explaining all that. So.
I think that's why it's imperative that we don't just plan to 34. That has to be whatever the stream load will carry, 40, 45, 50, whatever that number is. We need to be able to say someplace down the road, this group is looking at how much more capacity there can be out there.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because that sends a real level of confidence to the development community that we're not gonna be in this situation again. We're planning way ahead now.
So that's why I was glad that was in your schedule. And, you know, we're not just doing this, we are now looking beyond what happens after this, or maybe before the sentence.
We have to also just keep in mind that, I mean, looking at our list, and I haven't seen everybody else's list, but our list of development out there, you know, if the allocation things happen, you know, we might have 10 projects that move on, and we probably have 20 projects that are either on hold or have to be phased in a pretty severe way. The big scheme of things, we're talking about 20 developers. We're not talking about, you know, 200,000 citizens that are concerned about this. It's a really narrow focus of people impacted by what we're doing here on this issue. So, you know, maybe 50 different developers, and probably half of those probably be fine with whatever happens. So there'll be some conflicts with some of those, clearly. But let's not lose sight that this issue is focused on a fairly small group of people that we are sort of working through with. So it's not a wide, you know, issue as I see it. It's not a county-wide issue as much as development community issue. Toilets are still going to flush.
So we want to adjust the 2019 out of there then?
Or just clarify what that means.
Well, it was actually, we began in the fall of 2019, so we could even clarify that to say that it was the fall of 2019, that we didn't start in January. You know, it was very little of 2019 involved that work, but we'll look at that and see about cleaning that up.
Like I said, part of that's good, that we've known about it a while, and we've been working towards it, but some might say, well, we should already have a design if we've been talking about it that long. So.
And we're just, I'll ask, because we're comfortable with putting spring of 24 and early 2027. I mean, we're saying that's when it's scheduled to be online. I mean, I know we're very, very early, but we are fully comfortable with putting those dates out there.
If we're going to put a date, I'm comfortable with those dates. Any date's going to be, but you know, I don't know that this kind of the sandbag a number. Like, I don't want to put out a number that's, I think that there's, we're not going to be able to be lax and just twiddle our thumbs and take it easy and make those dates. But I think with the right team involved with it and the right moves made, we can beat those dates.
Good. What else?
That's all I had.
All right. Next up, William.
Yeah. But it is nice. I think this is the first meeting since pre-COVID that all 9 folks are here in person. So this is a big moment. So this will be a fairly short update, but as you guys probably remember, at the June 23rd reconvened board meeting, at the end of that board meeting, we did have and discussed a motion to approve and then a motion to move forward with the declaration of intent for a new ordinance for WSACC. And subsequent to that meeting, you know, we kind of heard everybody loud and clear that the one issue with the ordinance is some notice time periods and potential for that to delay us. So kind of WSACC team and the JH team basically reevaluated WSACC's options subsequent to that. And we did determine that WSACC has the authority to go right to interlocal agreement with its member jurisdictions to allocate the wastewater capacity.
And so we immediately after that last meeting got started on a draft of the interlocal agreement. Obviously, as we all know, the hardest piece of that agreement is going to be the allocation piece. So we've drafted the body of it. We've provided it to Mike and Chad, and we will have some ongoing discussions with them on the form of that. But the idea with that interlocal agreement is that would be the mechanism by which WSAC would allocate its wastewater treatment capacity to each member jurisdiction. And thereafter, the member jurisdictions can individually elect how they want to utilize their allocated capacity. So by doing the interlocal agreement, going to that step immediately, we've determined that a new ordinance and declaration of intent are unnecessary. And so we have drafted that interlocal agreement, like I said. And so kind of our ask tonight would be, obviously the allocation's not there. I mean, so it's not something at this board level, but what we'd probably like to do is go ahead and be able to reach out to the attorneys for the county and municipality to go ahead and start sharing the body of the agreement with them, to start getting comments on that. I just think we don't want to wait until we have the allocation and then start that process. We would kind of like to go ahead and have conversations with those folks now and some of your attorneys may already know and be privy to this discussion. Some might not know. But I think for the most part, we know your attorneys for your things. I mean, you can share with us, we can talk either here or offline about which attorney would be that point person. But the good news is, we have good relationships with the folks I think would be the attorneys as the point person. And so the ask for the board here would just be, can we go ahead and just start those conversations about, hey, we're proposing this interlocal agreement. It will be subject to the WSAC board approval and then ultimately the jurisdiction's approval, but just kind of start that conversation. That's something the board's okay with. And so as far as your representatives, we've worked obviously with Rich on the county's behalf. We also know Rich, Harrisburg's behalf as well. With the city of Concord, we worked with Valerie. With Kannapolis, we've worked in the past with Wally. That would be and they can obviously decide who they want to go with. For Mount Pleasant in the past, when we worked with John Scarborough. Would that be, and we'll reach out to them and they will tell us. I'm sure they'll go back to their clients and if they're not the right person, but I think just go ahead and starting conversations. And the good news, we obviously have a great relationship with Rich over the years, and that's Harrisburg in the county. We have a good relationship with Valerie. I know her personally, and that's a good thing. Wally, we've had deals with him over the years. He obviously has a ton of experience. And then we had a WSAC deal with John Scarborough when we had a deal involving Mount Pleasant. And so I think that will be a good thing to go ahead and start that process, because they might have some comments, technical legal comments to the form of the agreement that we can be working out right now while the committee is working on the allocation piece, which comes to the board. So anyway, just kind of wanted to provide that update. I think this can move it along much quicker than going through an ordinance process. And ultimately, we just determined that was just not necessary here. So we think we can get to the interlocal agreement much sooner, which I think we kind of heard the board loud and clear at the last meeting. We would like to get to that as fast as we can.
I would hope we could get it done by the next meeting, frankly.
Well, we certainly like to do that. And I think that, there's a lot of things outside of our control, but the good news is we do have the committee meeting again this Tuesday after next, and that would allow us to meet another time. So we have 2 meetings before coming back here. And then if you guys free us up, I'm going to immediately tomorrow reach out to the attorneys and start that conversation. Yeah, that's really the update there. You got any questions?
What should we do in the interim? Anything?
No, I mean, there's stuff that, I think it makes sense for you guys to honestly talk to your members of the committee. I would really do that. And you probably already are doing that. And, the good news, like we shared with Chad, is I think you guys did I'm just an observer, but I've been at those 2 meetings and I think your staff members have done well. I think you guys chose good folks from what I can tell. And I would advise you all to be talking to your representatives and getting their feedback, and you're providing feedback to them. So I think that would be the one homework to do, especially even before their next meeting on the 27th, I believe.
fear, and maybe it's unfounded, is that we have some sort of mad rush in the next 30 or 45 days of, as this sort of grows and we have developers that do some things to try to force our hand. And I don't want to use the M word, but if there was a way we could slow pace any approvals of capacity allocations until this interlocal agreement's done, that'd be great, but there may just not be a way to do that.
With the consistency of everybody being at 95% on the construction loans, hopefully that will
Take care
come
of
out
itself.
of that. I don't know. There may be.
Yeah, that's some of the discussions, I think, honestly, with your representatives and with your staff too, of, that those kind of conversations. But I do agree. I mean, if we can get this sooner, we can get this done. And ideally it would be August. And I can tell you, I've literally been here. I can tell you Tuesday, Wednesday, and today, and Chad and Michael are working on this. Literally, we're all kind of working on this as fast as we can, leaving no stone unturned. And then
When we have the interlocal agreement, in your opinion, that sets our policy.
Yeah.
Just that agreement
Yeah.
adopted by all the jurisdictions.
That's right.
That's how we allocate the.
Yeah.
And then the jurisdictions will have to come up with their own policies.
Right.
You know, they choose.
Well, and that's another reason we want to go ahead and have this conversation.
Yeah,
That what it is?
yeah, exactly.
Committee didn't drop any bombshells in the first two meetings as far as
No, we had a lot of good discussions.
capacity that we weren't aware of.
I guess the most part of one of our discussions was about economic development, how to handle that.
But again, as somebody said earlier, I mean, that's
We talked several different ways.
different based on jurisdiction.
That's right. And that's the beauty of what we're doing here, is to
A third party, independent third party, have an allocation, but the group didn't like that idea either. So I think it's going to go back to the jurisdictions to make those decisions. So.
Okay.
That's it. All right, we'll go to public comments. Anybody wishing to speak? State your name and address for the record. Your work address, filter.
Hey, my name is Cassie. Very well. I'm with the town of Midland. I think it's 4293 Highway 2427. You all know where it's at, but I would like to say I really appreciate you guys giving us the consideration to be on the board. I don't have any assumptions that we overstep any of Concord's ability to make those decisions. We work very well. Mr. McMillan and I work very well together with the city of Concord, and we have good discussion. I do realize that there are clearly some feelings that, are things that have transpired in the past in regards to positions on the WSACC board. Myself and Mr. McMillan have not, I can't speak to that because I was not involved in that. But, my sincere motivation is to help just provide information so you guys can know what we are thinking about. And I think that would relieve some of the, maybe you think we want to do this, maybe you think we don't. And we're all just, it's not as bad as anybody thinks it is. And, I worked for Jonathan when I first got out of college for almost 10 years. So he taught me a lot about, working together, communication, smart growth, all those things. And I think that, there are a lot of things that we could do as a result of, the issues with the utilities that can tie into other things that we're also struggling with here at the county, schools, all those different things. And so we would like to be a part of that. And I sincerely appreciate your consideration and congratulations. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Anyone else? Is everybody on the phone? Or we still doing that? All right. I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session for GS 143, 318, 11A3, A4, and A6.
So moved.
Second motion on the floor, probably second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Please stays.